Welcome back to the deep dive. So you sent us a really fascinating piece this time. It's an article from menmeetmen.com, and it's titled, "What is Gay Cruising? Unpacking the Raw UK Reality."
Yeah, it's quite a title.
It is. And that's exactly what we're going to try and do today. Our mission, if you like, is to properly unpack the reality of gay cruising, specifically in the UK, drawing on what this article presents.
Mm.
We want to go a bit deeper than just the usual perceptions.
And this article really does try to cover a lot of ground. It looks at the history, the reasons people get involved, the actual places, even the kind of silent communication that goes on.
Right, the risks, too,
Yeah.
and just how diverse the people involved are. It's pretty comprehensive.
It is. It touches on history, motivations, locations, that whole unspoken language thing, the risks, and yeah, the variety of men involved.
Exactly. Now, for listeners, your take on this might be, well, anywhere, really. Some might know this world well, others maybe not at all, or perhaps just from, stereotypes in films or something.
Which often aren't very accurate.
Not always, no. So, the goal here is just to get a clearer, maybe more nuanced picture based on what menmeetmen.com has laid out. Okay, so foundation first. What is gay cruising according to this piece?
Well, the article gives a pretty straightforward definition. It says it's the intentional act of seeking out other men for casual, often anonymous sexual encounters, typically occurring in public or semi-public spaces.
Okay. Intentional, casual, anonymous, public, or semi-public spaces.
Got
Okay.
it. But crucially, it frames this historically. This isn't like an internet invention. It's much older. It really emerged from a time when, well, same-sex desire had to be hidden. Openness wasn't really an option.
Right. So it's a world away from setting up a dating profile and arranging to meet someone for coffee. This is immediate. It's about reading the situation, the nonverbal stuff.
Exactly. It's not planned dates, no profiles. It relies heavily on that unspoken communication the article talks about.
So given we have all these apps now, Grindr, Scruff, whatever,
Mm.
why does cruising still appeal? What's keeping it going?
That's a really good question, and the article dives into several reasons. One big one they call the siren's song of anonymity.
Okay.
Think about how much of our lives are online now, documented, tracked. Cruising offers, like an escape from that, a chance for connection without leaving that digital trail back to your main identity.
Yeah, I can see that. Especially maybe for guys who aren't out or maybe are married or have complicated situations. That anonymity must be a huge part of the appeal.
Absolutely. The article even describes cruising spots as temporary autonomous zones.
Wow, okay. What does that mean? Like outside normal rules?
Kind of spaces where the usual social rules, especially around sex and visibility, are sort of suspended for a bit. Then there's what they call the thrill of the forbidden, the charge of the real.
Ah, the excitement factor.
Yeah, the article acknowledges that edge, the secrecy, the clandestine nature of it. It's unpredictable in a way that scrolling through profile just isn't. There's an adrenaline rush, real time, face to face.
That unpredictability, yeah, it's a real contrast to the often quite curated, sometimes disappointing online thing. Which brings us to another point they make, right? Digital fatigue.
Oh, definitely. That feeling of just endless swiping, messaging, maybe meeting up, and it's not what you expected. Burnout, basically.
We've all heard about that or felt it.
So cruising, in that sense, can feel like an antidote. It's visceral, it's physical, it's right there, immediate presence, bypassing all the digital back and forth.
Yeah, cutting to the chase in a way. And there's a practical side too, isn't there? Immediacy, convenience, and accessibility.
For sure. If you know where to go, the potential for a connection is, well, potentially right there. It avoids all the planning and messaging. Some locations are just part of everyday life, like parks or motorway services.
Right, and it might already be there.
Exactly. It caters to impulse. And then there's this other layer, echoes of history, threads of connection.
Ah, the historical link.
Yeah. For a long time, these places were lifelines, essential spaces for gay men to find each other when society was much more hostile. The article suggests that for some people, participating today is like a way of connecting with that past, that resilience.
So it's quite a mix of reasons then. Anonymity, thrill, escaping digital life, convenience, history. It's clearly more than just one thing.
Definitely more complex than it might seem on the surface.
Okay, so let's talk geography. The article actually maps out the typical UK locations. Where does this tend to happen?
Well, the classic spots are public parks and woodlands, big urban green spaces, basically. They mention Hampstead Heath in London, Richmond Park, Heaton Park in Manchester, Sutton Park near Birmingham as examples.
Places people use normally during the day?
Exactly. But then maybe later in the day or in specific known areas, they take on this other function. using the natural cover, trees, bushes for discretion.
Right, the dual purpose. What about less permanent spots?
Yeah, they talk about transient spaces, motorway services, and laybys. These are anonymous by nature, people passing through. So encounters there are often quick, maybe car-based. It's about opportunity for travelers.
A very different vibe from a park, I imagine. And coastal areas.
Coastal margins, secluded beaches and paths get a mention too. Places near Brighton, Blackpool, down in Cornwall, Wales. Again, using natural features, dunes, cliffs, quiet paths, and timing like dusk for privacy.
And then there's the one everyone sort of knows about historically. The infamous cottage, public toilets.
Yeah, historically huge. The article explains they were key meeting points but are less common now. Partly policing, partly redesigns, making them less suitable, partly just changing times and attitudes.
But they still exist.
They do, apparently. But the article flags them as high-tension, high-risk places, legally speaking.
Okay. And moving away from purely public spaces.
There are semi-public and commercial zones. Think cinemas sometimes, but more specifically, gay saunas and places with dark rooms. Saunas are interesting because they're kind of explicitly designed for this, often with more safety built in, a shared understanding.
Right, in a more managed environment.
And finally, just urban interstices, like canal towpaths, under bridges, certain car parks. These are really opportunistic spots, relying heavily on local knowledge, finding those hidden corners in the city.
It really paints a picture of this sort of hidden map overlaid on the regular world.
Yeah, and the article stresses how fluid it is, how much it depends on local context and word of mouth.
So you're in one of these places. How does contact actually happen? It's not like walking up and saying hello, right? This unspoken language section was fascinating.
It really is. It's almost entirely nonverbal. It often starts with the opening gambit, the glance.
The look.
Yeah, but not just any look. Eye contact that's held maybe just a second too long. A mutual signal of awareness, potential interest.
Okay, that's subtle signal. Then what?
Then it's about proxemics and movement, how close you stand, how you move, maybe lingering near someone, walking past them more than once, maybe mirroring their pacing slightly. Then, if the signals seem right, slowly, cautiously closing the distance.
Like a kind of slow dance without music?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
A choreography of approach. And then there are more specific but still subtle signals.
Such as?
Subtle signals, gestures and posture. Things like a slight nod, maybe raising an eyebrow, how your body is angled, maybe adjusting your clothes, a specific hand gesture, or even just tilting your head slightly to suggest moving somewhere more private. It's a whole vocabulary without words.
Wow. It's incredibly subtle. But what about rejection and
Ah.
consent? That seems critical in a nonverbal situation.
Absolutely vital. And the article really hammers this home. Rejection is also nonverbal. Turning away, breaking eye contact firmly, maybe a slight shake of the head. And crucially, the article says if you don't get a clear positive signal back, that is a no. Any lack of positive response means stop. Persistence is completely unacceptable. It violates the whole idea of consent.
So even with glances and gestures, consent has to be clear, enthusiastic, and ongoing.
Exactly. It has to be
Yeah.
actively given, even non-verbally. And it can be withdrawn just as easily by pulling back or changing body language.
That's such an important point. Okay, let's talk about the risks. The article covers navigating the risks, law, safety, consent, again, specifically in the UK. What's the legal situation?
So the key distinction the article makes is cruising itself, like looking for someone. Not illegal, but having sex in a public place, that is illegal.
Ah, okay, that's the line.
Yes, and it mentions relevant laws, mainly the Sexual Offenses Act 2003. That covers sex in public toilets, exposure, voyeurism. Also, the Public Order Act 1986, behavior causing harassment, alarm, distress can sometimes apply. And there's an old common law offense called outraging public decency.
So even if it feels discreet, if someone is offended or observes it, there can be legal trouble. What kind of trouble?
It can range. The article mentions fixed penalty notices like an on-the-spot fine or a formal police caution. But it could escalate to arrest, conviction, and potentially even being put on the sex offenders register.
Serious consequences.
Very. The article also notes police enforcement varies, maybe less targeted entrapment than in the past, but they do still act, often if there are public complaints. Discretion is a factor.
Right. And circling back to consent in this risky environment.
Yes, the article stresses it again. Read signals carefully. Respect no instantly. Understand consent is specific. Agreeing to one thing doesn't mean agreeing to another. No surprises. Respect boundaries. And absolutely, definitely no recording without explicit, enthusiastic consent.
Crystal clear on that. And what about just personal safety, being in these potentially isolated, anonymous places?
The article gives some very sensible advice. Trust your gut feeling. Always be aware of who and what is around you. Have an exit plan, know how you'd leave quickly if needed.
Good advice anywhere, really.
True. Also, maybe let someone know roughly where you are, if you can. Be careful with alcohol or drugs, as they lower inhibitions and awareness. Carry essentials phone, keys, maybe a small torch. Condoms and lube are vital. And be realistic about the risks of theft or even assault in isolated spots.
It's a definite balancing act between the allure and the potential dangers then.
It seems so, yes. A reminder that anonymity cuts both ways.
Okay, so who are the people involved? The article tries to move beyond stereotypes in faces in the shadows. What does it say?
It really emphasizes the diversity.
Okay.
On age, it says it's pretty much across the board, just a number mostly.
Yeah.
Young guys, older guys, middle-aged guys.
Just one demographic.
No. And relationship status,
Yeah.
it's complicated. You find single men, men in relationships, sometimes open, sometimes not, married men, and identity fluidity, men who identify in various ways on the LGBTQ plus spectrum might participate.
So it really cuts across neat categories.
It seems so. The article argues that beyond demographics, motivations matter more. And it lists all those reasons we talked about earlier, the anonymity, the thrill, escaping apps, convenience, exploring kinks, connection, the hunt, maybe lack of other options, or that historical link.
A very wide range of people driven by a complex mix of things.
Exactly. It's not a monolithic group at all.
Okay, so looking at the bigger picture, cruising's past, present, and future,
Yeah.
how does the article position it now?
It starts by acknowledging that historical necessity, it was vital when being gay was much more suppressed. Then it talks about the digital disruption. Apps changed everything, offering a different, often safer way to connect.
Undeniably.
But, it argues, cruising hasn't vanished. It shows adaptation and persistence. Locations might shift. People might use apps and cruise sometimes a hybrid approach. There's some commercialization like saunas. The demographics might evolve.
So it adapts rather than disappears.
That seems to be the conclusion. The future is uncertain, maybe. But because it taps into these fundamental desires, anonymity, immediacy, thrill, tangibility, it's likely to endure in some form. It suggests it's not just a relic.
Interesting. So wrapping up the main points from the article,
Yeah.
it's saying cruising is more than just public sex. It's complex, it has history, it meets certain needs even in the digital age.
Right. Understanding it doesn't mean endorsing it necessarily, but recognizing the human impulses behind it. It's framed as a sort of counterpoint to purely digital life, a reminder of physical presence.
And a part of queer history that's still unfolding, in a way.
Yeah, a testament to resilience and, well, the sheer complexity of how people seek connection and intimacy.
Okay, so bringing this deep dive on the menmeetmen.com article to a close, we should probably talk a bit about the source itself, the website, menmeetmen.com.
Right. The article positions the site as like a guide, a trusted guide to navigating the world of discrete gay connections, I think was the phrase.
And looking at what they offer, based on the article and their site, it seems pretty broad. It's not just about cruising.
No, definitely not. They have audio guides, safety advice, more on the culture, but also stuff on hookup apps, saunas, a whole range of ways guys connect.
Yeah, it seems their angle is providing clear, honest information without judgment. That comes across.
Which seems pretty useful, frankly, given the topic.
So if this chat has piqued your interest, or if you're actually looking for practical info on, discrete connections, local spots, safety stuff, menmeetmen.com seems designed to provide that.
It looks like a central resource covering quite a few bases, both the physical meeting spots and the digital side, too.
So yeah, the call to action is pretty clear. If you want to explore their guides, resources on connections, venues, safety company, check out menmeetmen.com.
Seems like a solid place to start for anyone wanting more info on this aspect of gay life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And maybe just one final thought to leave everyone with. Think about that underlying desire for connection, especially anonymous or discrete connection. How that need has shifted and adapted through history, with changing social norms and now technology.
From hidden historical meetings to public parks to apps.
Exactly. What does this enduring, adapting need tell us about ourselves? About human interaction, intimacy, and maybe the complexities of life today, both online and off. Something to mull over.
Definitely food for thought.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.